Hello again, folks. This is Sankar of the Upriver Crawfish, bringing you an update on the special military operations. So, as you will notice, today's update is titled "No, Ukraine is not winning." So that's what the theme of this will be. But before we start, let me give you an overview. Again, there's the whole of Ukraine. Here's the areas in which Russia controls. In this area, there was Kharkov, which is the one we'll talk about a lot today. There's Luhansk and Donetsk. These are the Donbass republics. Zaporozhye is here, and then Kherson is here. This here is Crimea. So let me go in. Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen Russia withdraw from Kharkov, and that the Ukrainians interpret it as a success of their counter offensive. And I mean, this has been a whole big operation and big propaganda battle, propaganda campaign rather, about the success of Ukraine in Kharkov. So let's just talk about what happened in Kharkov. So if we go back, all these areas in gray was controlled by the Russians. So this is the Kharkov main city. Then the rest here is the Kharkov Oblast. All right, so it's like the Kharkov state. So all this area here was controlled by the Russians, and then they left. Well, coinciding with them leaving was what the Ukrainians called an offensive that they had. So let's talk about it. So the Ukrainians launched an attack from Andreevka and Chuguev. Chuguev is a little bit north, I think it's somewhere around here. And they launched an attack towards Balaklia. When they came through to Balaklia, the Russian forces there, they fought. The Russians had a rear guard force there because the Russians were withdrawing from Kharkov. So if we look at it from one perspective, you can say yes, the Ukrainians is the Ukrainian counteroffensive. But what really happened is this: in Kharkov area, the Russian general staff been wanting to remove the troops from there, so as to focus in other areas. And because again, this is a special military operation, so Russia only earmarked about 200 plus thousand troops for these operations. So the operation as a whole is short on troops, short on infantry. So what the rest of most of the infantry that's doing the hard lifting in the Donetsk area, in the east of Ukraine, in this area, it are the troops from the Republican troops from Lugansk Republic and those from Donetsk Republic. Those are the forces that are doing most of the heavy lifting when it comes to infantry. So as a result, the Russians, even the Republican forces are not really getting as much casualties as the Ukrainians are, because the Republican forces are not that much. But the Russians are definitely also not getting that much, losing that much manpower. But their infantry is low, so they don't have a lot of infantry to spread around. So when the Russians were here, those were a lot of men holding these areas in Kharkov that were not doing nothing. Initially, the plan was to use these guys to come and get and do and launch an attack around Slaviansk. But again, without much infantry to spare, they couldn't do that. So they were stuck in Kharkov. Now, another thing, there's and I don't know if this is the same Sherwood Forest that the famous folk tale about how you call the guy Robin Hood. Whether that's the same Sherwood Forest they're talking about, but there's a forest around here called Sherwood Forest that the Russians that were ongoing battles in those areas with the Ukrainians constantly trying to take over. Remember, the Russians had this whole area since March, and the Ukrainians been trying to take it for a long time, and they couldn't take it because the Russians were staying and fighting there, and there were a lot of fights in that Sherwood Forest. Unnecessary casualties and stuff like that was happening. So the general staff looked at it and didn't think that it was necessary to keep Kharkov. Remember, what the Russians are doing now, after the start of the battle, they came with maneuver warfare and they attack on various axes so as to spread Ukrainian troops away from Donbass and allow them to be able to prepare the battlefield for the Donbass area. They achieved that. They got their forces all ready for the Donbass. So now, what they're doing is they're doing defeat in detail. That means they would take one area, focus on one area, get that area cleared, then go to another area. So as with the case of Lugansk Republic, that's how they went. They focused on Lugansk and then got Lugansk Republic cleared. Now they're focusing on Donetsk and getting that cleared. So the general staff looked at it and said, like, well, we need to reposition troops to those areas that we right now are focusing on, so as to advance a lot quicker. And as President Putin just said in his interview at the SCO conference, that the strategy is now subject to change. The SMO strategy, meaning that special military operation strategy, is not subject to change. However, the generals can make operational decisions. They can go ahead and change things operationally. And so this was their operational plan, to refocus the troops in different areas. So they had for almost a month or so been removing pro-Russian people from the Kharkov area and moving them into Russia, and they have been removing troops as well, leaving only some back as to perform rear guard action. So that has been the case over the time. What happened in this part here? This part here is somewhat speculation and somewhat borne out by the fact. Right as they were coming to the end of their withdrawal from Kharkov, that's when the U.S. intelligence found out that they were withdrawing, or maybe somewhere in the middle, U.S. intelligence found out that they were withdrawing from Kharkov. So the U.S. intelligence told Ukraine to start assembling force to attack Kharkov. The purpose being, probably from a military standpoint, they wanted to catch some of the Russian rearguard forces and put them in, capture them, kill them. That's what they probably wanted to do. But also, since this war from the Ukrainian side has been heavily political, and it's been a lot of things about propaganda more than about warfare, so they wanted to score a propaganda coup against the Russians as well. So the same thing they did in Bucha. Once the Russians started to withdraw, mind you, they didn't take over those places all the time the Russians were there. But as the Russians started to withdraw, then they started to bombard the area heavily. So this was somewhere of the same thing. So as the Russians moved forces and left a few members of the military from the Rosgvardia, and I think a few of the police special operations units in the area, along with some LPR reservists, that's when the Ukrainians attacked in force. Now, I even initially, when the Russian general staff came and made a statement how they had done some successful and diversionary actions, I was even skeptical. But what it turned out to be is that those actions that they were doing, what it did, it made Ukraine think that the fightings, when those guys, the areas where, like Balakia, when the Russians put up a fight over there, they thought that the Russians was trying to keep it. So as when they came across there, they bypassed it, and so for a period of time, Balakia did not fall. They bypassed it and moved on to other areas because them thinking that the Russians going to put up a hard fight there. And so they bypassed and moved to other areas, to Kupiansk and other areas, and to Izium, even in Izium. But what the Russian was doing was repositioning forces along the Oskol River to set up a new defensive line along the Oskol River. That way, they can prevent any Ukrainian breakthrough in the areas that they really care, like, for example, into Lugansk Republic, and let them take Kharkov. So that's what happened. If you notice from the videos from the previous update that I gave, the Ukrainians and the mercenaries that came with them, there were no great tactical operation that they did. They came in armored vehicles firing in areas where no one was firing. In the areas where people were returning fire, they bypassed those areas. Fine, good operationally and stuff like that. But they really didn't, there was no brilliant tactical maneuvers that they made, right? If they had come with those guys like that in an area where it was contested, a lot of them would have been killed. And a lot of them did get killed when they tried to attack areas where the rear guard actions were happening, where Russian rear guard forces were, because they wanted to capture those guys, kill those guys. But the Russians bombarded them with artillery, bombarded them with aircraft, and within that battle, 72 hours, they had lost around about 2,100 men in that battle, and that's just the ones dead. They had a lot of them injured. So, how do we assess this? So, that Ukraine regained these areas. Even to this day, they're still trying to enter a lot of those other villages and stuff like that. They regain all these areas is a success by default. They took a lot of areas from on an operational side. It was an operational victory as far as the amount of territory that they took. On the from the perspective of looking about destroying enemy forces, there was no success there. At best, you can look at this whole operation then as a tactical success rather than an operational success, because the enemy forces were allowed to withdraw. Were not allowed to withdraw, but they just couldn't capture or kill them and decimate them. So all those forces were able to get away. So think about it this way. In World War II, the Battle of Dunkirk, around 400,000 troops were in Dunkirk. The Germans were trying to crush them. The Germans, with Hermann Goering, deciding that he would crush them from the air, which was a stupid mistake he made. As a result, around 330 plus of those 400,000 forces were allowed to escape. French forces and British forces were allowed to escape. So, though Germany took over Dunkirk, at best it was a tactical success. Operationally, because they gained that much land, you can look at it from and say it's an operational victory. But as they did not destroy enemy forces, a huge amount of enemy forces were allowed to leave to fight for another day. That then you add that up, it was really a tactical success, and came to bite them in the butt later on, because some 300,000 and almost 400,000 forces were allowed to live and to get away. So it's somewhat of the same thing here. What you would notice so far, since Ukraine has taken these areas, they haven't been able to seize areas in which the Russians have put up fighting. In Krasny Liban, they're trying to attack that. They're still fighting. Though this map, this pro-Ukrainian map, shows that they're very near in Krasny Liman, but really they're not succeeding. They've been launching attacks at Krasny Liman, launching attacks at Yampil for, the better part of last week, and they haven't succeeded. So the areas in which Russian forces stood up to fight, they haven't succeeded. That can tell you then that, assuming that Russia wants to take Kherson in the future after they have satisfied their objective in the Donbass, if they wanted to take Kharkov in the future, I said Kherson earlier, but I meant Kharkov, they can walk right back in there and have more forces to bring to bear in Kharkov and take Kharkov. I have said a long time before that I think the Russians will take Kharkov, but I don't think Kharkov is going to be the next. I don't think Kharkov after Donbass will be the next. I think the Russians will secure Donbass because there's only a few more areas in Zaporizhzhia left to take. I think they will take the rest of Zaporizhzhia. Then I think they might move on. It's my thought. They might move on to Nikolaev and then Odessa. Either they would go straight to Odessa or they would cut Odessa off to make that link towards Transnistria. Once they cut off Odessa, then they would take their time on Odessa. At that point in time, I think that's when maybe by then they must start thinking about re-entering Kharkov, assuming that's what they want to do. Right? So, no, Ukraine isn't winning. By default, they got that land because the Russian general staff decided that without enough manpower, infantry to be exact, it makes their job harder to focus in the areas that they need to focus, and that was the only areas they are allowed to make changes in. From an operational standpoint, they couldn't change the overall strategy, so that's where they put their focus on. Now, in Kharkov, now in Donbass, the rest of the areas in Donbass is still proceeding as planned. The Russians still having people go methodically taking over places and bombarding the Ukrainians, and then little by little taking over places. So right now in Bakhmut, it's not showing on this map because again it is how you call it, pro-Ukrainian map. They don't show the successes that much, but in Bakhmut area, this the how you call them, what's the name of the guy, the PMC, Wagner PMC group are trying to encircle Bakhmut. So that battle is going on again. slowly, maybe things will increase a little bit more. Maybe things will be stepped up more now that they have removed forces from in Kharkov, but we don't know yet. They're still taking the time. Right now, the time is in the Russians' hands. The Russians don't seem bothered. It's the Ukrainians just making noise about all the places that making noise about all the success that they will have. Now let's go down to Kherson, where they all of a sudden now they forgot about this Kherson, and where they tried to attack a couple of weeks ago, and the attacks in this area went nowhere. This is the little area here that they keep trying to press an advantage here. They keep trying because a lot of the other places that they went, they got decimated, and they keep losing men here. But they keep again, the Ukrainians, they tend to double down. I wouldn't say they're skillful. I would say they are how you call it? I would say they are brave, but not particularly skillful. So they keep trying in this area to be able to capture this area and press that press on to seize more territory, and they keep losing men in this area. The Russians have destroyed some dam that have flooded their pontoon bridges from Zaporizhia area and flooded pontoon bridges here. So they have cut some of them off, and then the Russian went to town and was bombing them. So that's what's happening so far. The battle, things is going so far in the direction that the Russians want to go. Now, to the Russians, they're when this the Kharkov withdrawal started happening, for most people who support the Russian view on this conflict, it was a little disheartening. I'm not going to tell you otherwise, but mostly there were the Russian doomers. Okay, people who would call it Russian doomers, those who I personally think they are Russian patriots who really are tired with the disrespect that Putin is allowing the Ukrainians to have with these propaganda moves. I think those guys are Russian patriots, I would say, who are not particularly in favor of the particular strategy. Those guys are the ones who have problem with this. They have been very vocal, and sometimes if you read their stuff, it's demoralizing. But the truth is, the Russian leadership doesn't seem worried, and everything I can see I don't see the reason for them to feel worried. The doomers do have a point though. They know that this whole war is bigger than Ukraine. This is the West as a whole fight and using Ukraine to fight its battle against Russia. And in this Kharkov offensive, let's call it that, there were a lot more mercenaries from the West in that battle, going around in places that were captured, walking around freely in places, and so that just pissed the Russian, these hardcore Russian patriots, pissed them off, and they're wanting for Russia to fight this war without and putting and one hand behind his back. And so that's the perspective they bring, and they're saying that Russia should go and mobilize. Russia should mobilize and then bring more forces in and crush Ukraine already. And Russia should start destroying Ukrainian critical infrastructures, dual use infrastructures, and stuff like that, so as to handicap Kiev. And I will not tell you that I don't. I will not tell you that I'm in total opposition to that. I mean, Ukraine has been fighting this war, doing all launching terrorist attacks, and I mean just going no holds barred, doing what they want to do. It's about time that Russia shows them what will actually happen when Russia decides to go no holds barred. So I agree with that stuff. However, I have to give President Putin, you have to get and trust him a little bit. In this whole geopolitical game, it's not a game, but on this geopolitical map, during all the times that Russia has been in conflict in different areas, from Syria and all to even in Armenia and stuff like that, and the Russian position has been very restrained, yet, and the U.S. would take aggressive moves, Putin, in his gentlemanly behavior, still comes up winning. So it almost seems like it doesn't matter what the U.S. do. The Russians have said things wherein they're still winning. So from that perspective, maybe Putin knows what he's doing. Not just Putin, the Russian leadership, civilian and military leadership, knows what they're doing. One of the things I would say as to why they're doing things like this is, let's start first from what the U.S. intends to do. I can promise you that the U.S. don't think that Ukraine alone can beat Russia. But what the U.S. want to do is they want Russia to suffer the consequences of this war. So Russia should win, but win a Pyrrhic victory, which will in effect damage the Russian economy and cause problems in Russia. So it's not just about the war, and they want Russia to lose and blood and to spill blood and tears for this war. So the Russians launched this operation to deny all of that. So Russia will have just a small force that will get the stuff done, that will not, for which the effect will not reverberate on the Russian population as a whole. And Russia will continue to progress and develop economic strength, while at the same time taking the time and ensuring that Ukraine is dealt with properly. Not only Ukraine, the longer this stuff goes on, this war of attrition goes on, the longer it's in favor of the Russians. Because guess who's going to suffer it? Europe, where they're going to suffer devastating economic losses. So that's why Putin did this war as it is. Rather than do a full mobilization, bring in a whole lot of manpower that you then have to support with money and stuff like that. And a lot of times you might have to put the economy on hold and stuff on hold to do that. That's what they don't want to do. They don't want America to succeed in lose from on the militarily, but gain from an economic standpoint where Russia becomes poorer and stuff like that, and its population suffer. So that's why part of the reason why Putin is fighting the war as he is. Another thing too that the Russians considering, this is a whole geopolitical field. There are other areas in which the Russians expect that the U.S. will try them in. The Russians want to be ready for those. In Syria, and now we see in Nagorno-Karabakh, and we see stuff flaring up between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. So, Russia wants to have that flexibility to be able to address any nonsense that the U.S. and the West bring towards it. Wants to be able to parry all of this, their attacks. That's how the Russians are fighting this war. So, while I agree, just me being on the pro-Russian side, would like to see Kiev brought to the knees quicker, especially such a vile regime. On the other hand, I can understand why President Putin is approaching this as it is. Not so much so as to look nice in front of the West, but to be able to make them throw all their best into this fight and still see that they're getting their butt kicked. Hence the reason you see they are very angry. You can tell the anger from their statements and pronouncements and stuff like that. So another reason why the Russians have not tried to interdict a lot of the weapons. Part of it could be Ukraine is just a big place to interdict all those weapons, but at the same time too, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the Russians want the U.S. to send their best, and it will get destroyed, and they will make no difference to the outcome of the battle, so as to make it clear to the West, all your best weapons you got is nothing against us. A year, Kiev is now asking for F-16s. They will get shot down again. But I think the U.S. shouldn't just send them X-16. The U.S. got about, if I'm not mistaken, it got about 75 Raptors. Right? Just give them 25. Let's see. Since the U.S. think that they got such great planes, why don't you just give them the Raptors? Give them 25 Raptors, maybe about another 35 F-35, and see whether that makes a difference. See what happens to it. Don't give them F-16, because now you would say, when they shoot down the F-16s, you would say, well, the F-16s are older planes. So give them your best, and let's see how that goes. Because right now, the West is trying to use Ukraine to put in place their best strategy to how the thing they should fight how NATO should fight Russia. And Russia is looking at it from that perspective and saying, yo, bring everything, use your best weapons, bring in your weapons, and then you bring in your strategy, your military strategy, and we destroy them. That would be able to point out to you that you can't fight with us. So again, Ukraine is not winning. They never have been. They were not winning from the beginning of the war. They haven't been winning all this time, and they're not winning now. Kharkov was an operational decision. Yes. It was one of the things that hurt people's heart, is the fact that that means people are going to get prosecuted and killed in Kharkov. In fact, there are reports now of what's happening. I will even show you a video of on my tail of the Telegram about and that shows one older guy who happened to be in the head of a sport complex or so. He's been taken in a car and carried by the Ukrainian forces. What will become of him, no one knows yet. And all because he continued to serve in his position. And even as he was saying, look, I didn't serve them. I was serving our village. I was serving my village. And they still said no, he should get in the car. And they were going to take him and interrogate him and do whatever, do their worst. So that's the situation around and regarding Kharkov. The Ukrainians are not winning. In the areas wherein the Russians stand up to fight, they're getting killed a lot. And the death count is going up a lot now. Because for the past couple of weeks, they've been losing around something like 1,000 men around a day for a day, at least for the last 3 weeks. So that is a huge amount of manpower that they're losing. So those forces, their remaining trained forces that they brought into Kharkov, those guys will get extended. And when Russia gets ready to attack Kharkov again, if they want to, then they will get cut through like butter. So that's the situation. So I'll begin today's tale of the telegram with this official from, he is apparently the director of a sports complex in the Balaklia area. And the Ukrainians captured him. The fact that he didn't leave, that also tells you that he was not interested in being, he was not for anyone. He was not for the Russians either. And the conversation it went like this. How was your life? The Ukrainians asking her, how was your life under those? And they use an expletive. And then he said, what do you think? It wasn't very cheerful. Then they asked him, what position did you hold? He responds, director of the Vimpel Sports Complex. Then they go, Office of Youth Affairs and Sports? No. He says, Sports Complex Vimpel there. What is salary? They ask. None. Then they ask him, and why did you and expletives start serving those? Again, another expletive. Then he responds, I didn't serve them, guys. I didn't. Then they go, you were just the director, weren't you? Get in the car. And he responds, no, guys, I didn't serve them. I served our city, Balaklia. And they go, take him. So his fate, who knows? What will end up being of him? So let me play the clip.
Пожалуйста.
Целуйка Станіслав Володимирович.
Как жилось при пидорах?
Як ви думаєте?
Какую должность
Не
занимали?
дуже весело.
Какую должность занимали?
Директор СК «Вимпіл».
По делам молодежи и спорта?
Ні. Спорткомплекс «Вимпіл». От
Какая зарплата была?
ніякої.
Пошел пидорасам служить.
Я не служив їм, хлопці. Ні.
А что ж?
Ні, хлопці, не служив я їм. Я служив в нашій Балаклії.
Пакуй его.
I just want to point out that one of the pro-Russian trolls from my on one of my videos that I put up for the Russian Marine commander in Mariupol, Struna, codename Struna or String. He was indeed injured. So it turns out that he was indeed injured. He did lose a leg due to stepping on a landmine. But outside of that, he got prosthetics. Now he's fine and stuff like that. But he was a brave Marine commander, very inspiring to his men. So I want to acknowledge that. This is another tale from the Telegram. This is a video of, apparently he's the third man in, the third and powerful guy in China, Li Zhenchu or something like that. And he's one of Xi Jinping's trusted advisors. So just take a look at it. There is English subtitle about what he's saying about the Chinese position. He makes it pretty clear here.
俄罗斯核心利益和一些重大关切问题上，中方也是对俄罗斯也是表示理解和充分的支持，充分的理解和支持。
Мы, в свою очередь, по вопросам, представляющим жизненно важные интересы и серьезной оплошности России, также всегда оказываем нашу поддержку.
Вячеслав Volodin.
就像现在的乌克兰问题，那么美国和北约直接逼到俄罗斯的家门口，涉及到俄罗斯的国家安全和人民的生命安全。那么在这种情况下，俄罗斯采取认为是应当采取的一些措施，中方是表示理解，而且从不同的方面给予策应。
Например, по вопросу Украины мы видим, как США и союзники по НАТО наращивают свое присутствие просто по периметру России. Это серьезно угрожает государственной, национальной безопасности и безопасности жизни россиян. Поэтому мы с полным пониманием относимся ко всем мерам, предпринимаемым Россией для защиты этих ключевых интересов и оказываем наше содействие.
那么我认为这个可以说是俄罗斯被逼到了墙角。那么在这种情况下，俄罗斯是为了维护国家的核心利益而采取的一次反击。
По украинскому вопросу мы видим, как они поставили Россию в безвыходное положение. И в этом случае Россия сделала важный выбор – это отдать решительный отпор.
So basically, so his name is Li Zhanshu, number 3 in the CCP power structure. So he's one of Xi's most trusted lieutenant. Apparently he's a hardline Maoist fundamentalist. So he was visiting Russia. But basically he highlighted China's position that in all geopolitical sphere, China would stand for Russia's national security interest, and then in specifically about the Ukrainian war, China is standing with Russia because they know that NATO and U.S. expansionism is what threatened Russia's security. I don't know that I would say this is a revelation, but I mean it's just highlighting the Chinese position. This one is a video of Ukrainian troops getting shelled. I don't know why they're crawling. If you're getting shelled with artillery rounds, it's better for you to get and run as fast as you can out of the zone. But they were crawling. I don't know what that is about. Let me lower the volume. So they are crawling. Why? Well, the other guy at the top here, he's not dead. Maybe the rest are not dead. But this guy, this blast here is too close. So it could have been that he did get killed. Another tilt of the telegram. These are VDV, Russian VDV troops, the airborne troops, putting raining artillery on Ukrainian positions. When this war is over, the tail of these guys will be told because they have been tough. They have been the ones really that Russia have relied on in this battle. I bet you the Ukrainian troops hit them. I bet you the Ukrainians themselves hit them.
Восстановить наводку! Установлено! Заряжено! Орудие! Выстрел!
the hit over there seemed like it caught fire.
Орудие! Выстрел! Заряд уместный, один снаряд заряди. Орудие! Выстрел! Расчет в укрытии!
Yeah, let these yeah, these guys crawling again.
Были подавлены танки в наступлении противника, соответственно.
This is a video from March 2022, from Rudovka, in which the Russians in Kharkov were burying the bodies of Ukrainian soldiers that the Ukrainians refused to take. And it is those bodies that the Russians buried now that the Ukrainians are trying to use for their fake propaganda about Russians killing and massacring a lot of people, and then burying them in mass grave. So here's the video. I will do a individual reporting on this. Yeah. And they were doing this, with fire all in the background. Let me pull up the sound. That's the artillery round that just went off. The DPR and LPR did this too. They took the Ukrainian prisoners and made them go and gather those bodies and bury them. And the Russians took all those bodies and buried them in the forest. So now the text that they get is that it's being used as
Тела
propaganda.
украинских военнослужащих с передовой попали под минометный обстрел, но тем не менее задачу выполнили. Значит, привезли их в городской морг для дальнейшей передачи их близким.
Putting them in body bags. But those for which they got names from, they put the names on the crosses so as to identify who they were.
Это вопрос куда? Водохранки нету.
Выбирайте, наверх полегче было кидать его.
Производим захоронение украинских
And
военнослужащих.
remember this area, because that's the area where the Ukrainians are now
с украинским режимом.
going digging up bodies and claiming that there was a massacre.
Их забирать, поэтому своими силами производим захоронение на городском кладбище.
Here's a map showing what's happening around the Bakhmut area, or Achemovsk. So Achemovsk is the same as Bakhmut. Achemovsk is the name the original name, and then the Ukrainians gave it Bakhmut. So Wagner, PMC, they're trying to encircle Bakhmut. So there are some of the forces here on the Patrice Lumumba highway, and then they're trying to encircle from this from north, and then from southeast. So northeast and southeast. They also close up on Zasivo and Otradovka. They're attacking from here. So they're looking to encircle Bakhmut. There's also movement towards Solidar. But again, this is a war of attrition, so everything is moving slow. In the meantime, in the EU is moving to cut off money from Hungary, accuse them of damaging democracy. Say Hungary is no longer a democracy. They will determine for Hungary whether they are a democracy or not. They are no longer a democracy. They are a hybrid democracy. So they are cutting money from Hungary. Now, what will Hungary do? For all the nonsense that they have gotten from the EU, trying to force different social regimes on them that their population do not approve of, it would be good for Hungary to say, you know what, we'll go our way and do a Hungarian exit. But who knows whether Viktor Orban has that kind of pull. This is my final clip today. I will leave you with it's some Syria firepower and put down range against the Ukrainian forces in Balaklia just recently. The Balaklia is in Kharkov. Russians put some destruction to them. Anyways, I'll leave you with this clip. Please help by clicking the like button. If you enjoy the content, click the like button, hit subscribe, and share. Let's try to beat these algorithms. All right? Sankara out. Let me lower the volume before I get a strike. It's a nice audio though, but YouTube is going to own me for that if I don't turn that off.